point out a few house rules to assist council members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Council members, your microphone is live, so please keep your microphones on mute until you wish to speak. For tonight's meeting, we are using Zoom to host the City Council regular meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are two icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a council member speaking. Please use raise hand to be recognized by the mayor and enabled to speak to the council. To comment under oral communication or on any agenda item, you're allowed 3 minutes to speak per agenda item. Emails limited to 350 words can also be submitted to the city clerk and it will be read into the record. This word limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute time allowance. Only attendees using the Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participants calling in from the telephone will only be able to listen and cannot provide feedback or public comment. Lastly, because we are all not in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call.
Thank you. I hereby call to order the regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 19th, 2021 for the City of Monte Sereno. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Turner?
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler?
Present.
Councilmember Mekachek?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi? Mayor Pro Tem? Nice. Looks like he's still an attendee. And Mayor Newfield.
Present. And when Mr. Elahi arrives and is promoted, let's go ahead and make a note of the time of his arrival.
Yeah, then we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Clerk or Mr. City Manager, any changes to the orders of the day?
None for me.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to bring something to your attention. I received a piece of correspondence for new business agenda item 2. I emailed it to all of you. We received it this afternoon, so I expect there may be a speaker on that item.
Okay, we will watch for the speaker and they will have their chance to speak at the time. If they don't, then we can look and see about adding the written communication if there was one to the record. Thank you. Okay. All right, moving now to oral communications. Oral communications is the time for members of the public to speak on matters which are not on the agenda. There are members of the public who wish to speak to items on the agenda. We will call on you when the item comes up and you'll have your opportunity then. If we have members of the public who wish to speak to items not on the agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand to be recognized at this time though. Seeing none, we will close oral communications and move to written communications other than what Mr. Leonardis mentioned, which we will come back to. Do we have any written communications that have not reached the meeting minutes, meeting agenda?
I've not received any.
Okay, then moving now to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is generally moved on and adopted in a single resolution. If we have any members of the public wishing to have items pulled for discussion that appear on the consent calendar, items 1 through 7, please raise your hand to be recognized. Similarly, if we have any members of the council who wish to pull an item for detailed discussion, please raise your hand to be recognized on that. If you have just brief questions for staff, we will address those directly, and then we can visit the full consent calendar. Seeing no hands up for public for pulling items from the consent calendar, let's open it to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to items on the consent calendar? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will close public comment and turn this now to council members. Do we have any council questions on items on the consent calendar? Mr. Mekachek.
Yes, I'm looking at the revenues and expenditures report for the month of August, and I was wondering what is in other revenue 292 miscellaneous for $283,600. Just that caught my eye, and I can't remember what it was in the budget, what that line item was.
Mr. Samaranos, do you have the
Yes,
answer to us?
I'm sorry. I missed that question. I know it was under the category other expenses,
Yes,
Other revenues.
other revenues. Okay. Miscellaneous
01292.
292. Okay, let me look that up here. Well, there were no revenues recognized under that category. Are you referring, you're referring to the budget item then? What was budgeted?
That is correct.
Okay.
It'd be great if we had a whole bunch of those items.
Yeah, I'd have to bear with me. I'll pull up the actual budget and find the answer.
We can circle back on this one. It's not, we don't need to wait.
Yeah, I'm going into my files here. CIP. $292. Okay, that includes income expected for the annex building project. It's the housing element LAIF grant for $65,000. It's the for the annex building, it was $199,000. That's earmarked for the annex building project. And then finally, the REAP grant for the housing element project for $20,000.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate that.
Sure.
All right, any other questions regarding items on the consent calendar? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So move.
And a second? I'll add the second to that since I have my mic here.
Okay, got a motion by Councilmember Nekachuk and a second by Mayor Newfeld. Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Nekachuk,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi,
Aye.
and Mayor Newfeld.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Turning now to public hearings. We have a series of items, actually 1 through 4, all relating to Seaborn Court. So I'm going to go ahead and open this for the staff discussion, and let's go ahead and talk about, I think initially, should we handle each of these with the staff report separately, or are we going to have one that covers everything? And then we will move from staff report to the presentation, if we have one by the developer, and then open public comment and return it to council for full discussion. So first, staff report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. This is Diana Perkins, City Planner for Monte Sereno.
And the first application before you tonight is a tree removal permit to remove 4 trees. And the trees are located along what will be the new private street of Seaborn Court. This item was heard by the Site and Architectural Commission at their October 6th meeting. And they had concurred with the staff recommendation to approve removal of these 4 trees. They also asked that the replacement trees that are planted be native trees, and that they be trees that will provide a shade canopy over the street, but will not cause damage to the pavement in the future. And that concludes the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, any questions from council members? Yes, I have a question which is on the technical aspects of that, which is, does our resolution, and this may be a question for Mr. Rudin or maybe for Ms. Perkins, does our resolution include the language that would cover those recommendations by Site and Architecture regarding the type of trees and the shade canopy and not disturbing the street once installed? Is that included in the resolution that we've got before us tonight?
We can certainly clarify that language in the resolution if the council so chooses.
All right. But it's your understanding that that it's not clarified yet at this time. Is that correct, Ms. Perkins?
Correct. The resolution just speaks to the 4 replacement trees.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions from council regarding this? If none, then let me go ahead and open item 1 to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to be heard on the tree removal permit issue for the 4 trees along Seaborn Court? If so, please raise your hand to be heard on this, and we will go through each of these one by one in the public hearing. So let's talk specifically to the tree removal permit at this time. Seeing no hands, we will close this to public comment and bring it now back to council discussion. Mr. Mekachek, I saw you unmuted yourself first there. Are you ready to?
I'll defer to Councilmember Lawler.
Okay, Councilmember Lawler.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say that I had listened to the Site and Architecture meeting, and I really appreciate the conversation they had about these trees that they're asking to provide a shade canopy. So they wanted to make sure that the cul-de-sac was visually softened, as well as provide shade to counteract the heat from the asphalt. So I thought that that was very thoughtful, and I support adding that to the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mekachek.
Do we have the applicant attending, and are they going to say whether they would agree with that or not? Because I think that would be super helpful to have the applicant agree to that.
If we've got the applicant and they wanted to make a comment and offer suggestions to that as we address this issue, that may be helpful. Looks like we've got Mr. Zazueta. We'll go ahead and recognize you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you giving me the time to speak tonight. We spoke with the ARCID site committee a couple weeks back, and we had no problem with providing these trees in the manner that they suggested. I've already spoke with my landscape architect about doing it and the selection of the proper trees.
All right, thank you very much.
And just to, implement that recommendation by the site and architecture, section 4 of the resolution already calls for 4 24-inch box replacement trees to be provided adjacent to the court. I think the only aspect of this which may be missing is just inserting the words native variety into the resolution. So that would be my recommendation as to how to address this issue.
Thank you. I guess to make sure that we don't leave any loopholes, I would suggest that we amend that resolution to include the language Mr. Rudin raised, native varieties, but also language to address the issue of providing shade and to be compatible with the site in terms of root systems so as not to disturb the roadway. Mr. Mekachuk.
And perhaps if Ms. Seaborn is attending, if she could just give us a verbal commitment, that would be super. Make things go smoother.
Yeah, I'd suggest that we should just put it into the resolution rather than verbal commitments, since verbal commitments don't bear any real weight in the scope of this. So, Mr. Rudin, you have perhaps some language for a proposal to modify the resolution?
Yeah, I would recommend that if council is inclined to introduce a motion to approve, that it be a motion to approve the resolution with the conditions of approval as suggested by staff, with modification that section 4 of the resolution be modified to require the condition that 4 24-inch box replacement trees of native variety be provided adjacent to Seaborn Court. And I believe the mayor had some particular language there with respect to in order to provide shade and not have selected so that the root structure does not interfere with future pavement.
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Lawler.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say you could just use the language on page 1 of the staff report that says 4 24-inch box trees, replacement trees be planted along Seaborn Court with an emphasis native trees that will provide a shade canopy over the street that will not cause pavement damage in the future. You could just lift it from that, I suppose. Does that cover it?
Yeah, that sounds good. Other comments? Do we have any other comments before we put forward the modified version with the conditions? Seeing none, then I would go ahead and move to add the conditions as discussed by staff, as referenced by Ms. Lawler, to this, and then to go ahead and move to approve this as modified.
I'll second.
Motion made by Mayor Lethal, seconded by Councilmember Lawler. Councilmember Chenner?
Yes.
Councilmember Mekachuk?
Aye.
Councilmember Lawler?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi?
Aye.
And Mayor Lethal.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Moving now to public hearing, item number 2. This is the site development permit and tree removal permit application for the 3,375 square foot single story house at 16215 Seaborn Court, which would probably for convenience be referred to as Site 1. Staff report on this, Ms. Perkins.
Thank you. Yes, as you mentioned, this is lot 1 of the site, and this lot is has its side yard adjacent to Saratoga Los Gatos Road. And the proposal is for a 1-story house that is a total of 3,375 square feet, and the removal of 2 existing trees on the site, a cedar and a plum tree. As part of the original subdivision approval, there was a requirement for a sound wall along what is the rear lot or the rear property line, I'm sorry, of lot 1. And as part of the Site and Architectural Commission's recommendation for this project is that a condition be added that the sound wall materials be reviewed and approved by the city in order to ensure that the adjacent neighbor, the materials are acceptable to the adjacent neighbor also. Additionally, there was the condition of the replacement of two 24-inch box trees for the two that are proposed for removal. And this does conclude the staff report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Council member questions, Ms. Lawler?
Thank you. Quick question regarding the fence, the sound wall. Did you say that the materials were to be consistent both on lot 1 and lot 2, considering that they both abut the same property?
Correct. There's a portion of the neighboring property that also extends onto lot 2 of this site. So you, with the next item, you'll see that there's a similar condition to make sure that on the neighbor's property, their backyard sound wall fence is consistent material.
Okay, great, thanks.
Other questions? I've got one, which I'll go ahead and ask, and that is, Ms. Perkins, have you carefully reviewed the original site location and sizing for this particular property and proposed construction, as well as the other ones, as compared to what was presented to us in the subdivision map? Have you made that comparison yourself as you reviewed the proposed plans?
Yes, I did review the previous project information for the parcel map. There was, subsequent to the parcel map approval, there was a lot line adjustment submitted by the applicant, and that was to make some minor lot line changes between the 4 lots, including Seaborn Court on the site. That is an administrative review by staff, by myself, as well as the city engineer, and that has been approved also.
Okay.
So the lot sizes might be slightly different than what was originally approved with the tentative map, but they do conform to the lot size and the frontage requirements of our zoning code.
And I guess expanding on my question, there's 2 parts to this now. One is, what about the footprint and placement of the now proposed house versus what was presented to council initially? And it may or may not be different on this one. There are significant variances when we come to items 3 and 4, which we will talk about more specifically. I'm wondering if you have any opinion as to the footprint of site 1 in terms of what was shown to council and then now what is now being presented. And then related perhaps to that, the grading that is required for site 1, is it part of this application, and is it consistent with what was presented in the original subdivision map?
So as far as, sorry, take my glasses off. As far as I don't know what the difference is in the proposal of the houses from the tentative map application. That would have been sort of a reference information, but was not part of the actual approval of the tentative map. The current plan shown does meet all of the zoning standards for building height, setbacks, lot coverage. And the grading is, I do believe, is consistent with the previous tentative map information.
Okay, any other questions by council at this time before we open this to public comment? Seeing no hands going up, let's go ahead and open this regarding site 1, item 2 on the public hearings to public comment. If we have any members of the public wishing to speak to this, please raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring this back now for council discussion. Council members, comments? So much quiet. I'll go ahead and put out a couple of my comments first. I have some concern with the drawings that they may not reflect the landscaping that we required regarding the screening from Highway 9. My assumption is that the map and the landscaping that we required are going to have to control, and that our approval of any of these construction permits today needs to have as a condition that it be fully compliant with the conditions that we've put on the approved map for the tentative and then the final approved maps. I don't want to get into a situation where we approve the permit here and somehow it mistakenly takes away something that we were requiring initially. So I would be suggesting that we should consider adding as a condition or a clarification that this must be fully compliant with the subdivision map, and that nothing on what we approve today would change that. I'm not sure, Mr. Rudin, if that's something we can do. If it is not, then I would be requesting additional time to study these with full copies of the blueprints of the subdivision and the proposed permits, so that we can ensure that we're doing this properly and that we're following what we required before. So question for Mr. Rudin, number one, about adding conditions that simply would say that the permit today does not override in any way what we approved before for the subdivision. Is that a possible and good way to do this? Secondly, what is the timeline, Mr. Rudin, for our need to take action on this? Do we have to act here tonight, or can we push this out so that we have time to really study those plans more closely to make sure that they are compliant?
So I would suggest that certainly the council can approve a condition of approval that requires compliance with the landscaping plans that were proposed and included in the tentative map application and conditions of approval. I think that being said, to the extent that the footprints have changed on any of these projects, that may not necessarily be the absolute best way to go on this. Because if you do have a conflict between, your approved site and site development permit, which says your building footprint goes here and you can build, and your landscape plan, which, says you shall have a tree in this location, that would be concerning, because then we would have to likely come back to council to figure out how to resolve that. So, to the extent that the council can certainly modify, prior conditions of approval, to the extent that they're not going to impose new or more severe impacts under CEQA. Now, that being said, I think that there was landscape screening on the Lot 1 project that was contemplated under the tentative map approvals, specifically for the purpose of, ensuring mitigation of scenic impacts. So it does make sense for the council to consider requiring compliance, at least with respect to this particular lot. But I don't necessarily think that, if there was, a couple trees or other things that were moved slightly, that would necessarily trigger, additional requirements for re-review under CEQA, or require the, disapproval of this project necessarily.
What about the timing for us to take action on this? If we do want to look at the documents more carefully, see them full-sized, have them delivered to us so we can really study them, what's the timing? Do we need to act on this immediately or face repercussions from that, or is it okay to push it out?
I think that the council likely can push it out until November 2nd without that necessarily causing any issues under the Permit Streamlining Act. So, the Subdivision Map Act has deemed approval provisions that, can be invoked. I'm less concerned about that happening with site development permits.
Okay, thank you. Other council member comments? Yeah, Mr. Mekachuk.
Yes. Mayor Luthold, I recall this was a very difficult and tumultuous time, and I believe that we have to make sure that the conditions that were made during the approval stage are followed through, and it would be helpful if we go through, and I'm proposing we go through this, take a look at everything, and we could approve it subject to seeing a red line of the changes between what was on the tentative map and what we're seeing tonight. And then at our next meeting, we could have it in the November meeting, just say, here's the red lines. Do they all look okay? Are they material or not? And then have a final vote at that point in time. But I think it would be helpful to give an indication whether we're going to approve this or not tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Lawler.
Good question. I just wanted to confirm that we had conditioned approval on these properties. The houses could not exceed 3,500 square feet. Is that correct? That's a question for our city planner or for our attorney. I remember, I believe it was, they could not exceed 3,500 square feet. And so in this case, none of them do. So at least that's what I believe.
And this is a question for the planner. What's the zoning applicable for this? Is it R8?
Correct. The zoning district is, yes, R18, which for single-story homes allows up to 3,300 square feet, and for two-story up to 3,000. And that is exclusive of a accessory dwelling unit.
So I'm hoping that answers Councilmember Lawler's question.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes, I remember when we originally talked about this, we were concerned about the hedges along the property line, that we were going to specify that the hedges were going to be mature hedges rather than the small ones that we had talked about at that time. I guess my concern is a process question. We have the original plan that we looked at and suggestions, and now we're going to go into approving all of this. But how do you actually blend the two together if there's a time lapse? Suppose it takes 2 years to build this, then how do we know that everything that we have asked for is actually implemented? And that's a question maybe for our builder or Ali. I don't know if Ali is here.
Yeah, I think I'd suggest that it's as much a question for us to look at as we implement it, as well as for Mr. Rudin in terms of how we follow on to make sure that this process is done right. It's really comes back to the issue of the final map which is that the subdivision has to be built, the final version of the subdivision and all of the improvements have to match the subdivision that we approved on the tentative map. And nothing can happen that is afoul of that. But it leads me to be concerned about the issue that that was raised before, which is the issue of apologizing for failing to do so after the fact, rather than making sure that it's done right from the outset. And that's really the issue that I'm bringing up here with saying that we need time, from my perspective, to extremely carefully review this. Because my opinion is that if we did approve the subdivision map and, for example, had grading requirements and how much fill can be added and how much can be removed there, I think if we put in if we had a conflicting site development permit now, we would have created that problem for ourselves. So I think we have to ensure this, and as our city planner has changed in the interim, I think it's tough to put this on Ms. Perkins and say that we expect that she has already done this. We may need her help to really study the tentative map and to make sure that this is compliant with our tentative map, or we need to do that ourselves. So that's why I'm bringing this up. I like Mr. Mekachuk's idea that it would be nice if someone would point out to us, similar to a red line, all of the things that are at any variance whatsoever from what was on our subdivision map. I'm thinking as we move down, and we can talk about these separately. Site 1, I did not study as carefully. I know that the screening from Highway 9 was critically important to us on the tentative map. And so that is my primary concern here, as well as the potential cut for the garage area here, whether they're taking out more than we approved initially here in terms of grading. So those are things that I want to check more carefully. I'm not averse to putting this into a more ministerial approval, potentially even on the consent calendar, if everything turned out to be compliant, because I don't want a long meeting next time with this being completely rehashed. However, I'm very uncomfortable today, especially as we get to the sites 2 and 3. And when we get there, I'll point out what some of my concerns are about those. But I think even with site 1, I'm looking to definitely have this comparison done much more carefully before I'm ready to approve this.
And Mayor, if I may sort of interject on the process question that was just raised. The requirements, at least in the Hillside subdivision and scenic corridor for this particular tentative map, which are not typically required for most tentative maps and final maps for subdivisions, is that the Hillside subdivision and scenic corridor tentative map has to show the approximate location of all trees and groups of trees bearing a diameter of 6 inches or more, the proposed limits on each lot within buildings within which buildings may be erected. So basically your permitted building envelope. Trees which may be removed, a tentative overall grading plan, and preliminary landscape plans. And so the real question is, as you're considering this particular application, is not whether it complies in every single absolute sense with what the council previously approved, but whether or not any sort of variations are such that that they're material to the project and material to what the council's prior approval was. So, the idea that maybe, if grading quantities change by 20 cubic feet, that's not necessarily something that's going to be material. Or if, one particular tree is moved from one location to another, that doesn't mean the council can't approve it. Now, whether the council would like to approve it or would like to, consider this, this is something that is appropriate for the council to consider on project by project basis. Now that these are individual lots, they're each a separate project. The council can consider how best it thinks, the aesthetics of the project comply with the city's design guidelines and so forth. And again, since these are now each separate lots and they're all separate projects, the council can choose to proceed with some or all of them. You're supposed to consider each one on their own merits, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we went through a lot of this, and part of the reason we analyzed the heck out of this project was we had a lot of opposition on it, and that was very, very helpful to analyze it. We don't seem to have anybody else speaking on the subject, so I guess it's left to us. I think the red line is a great idea, and you're right. Planning Commissioner Perkins has done the best she can, and without the background, she really needs to. She needs more time. I mean, she's got 4 projects which usually take 4 months to come before us, but they're all coming in a 2-week time period or 4-week time period. So if she could go back and really redline everything else and say, this is the changes, and then also recommend whether the change is material or if it affects it or not. And it'll just be a check the box and we're done with it. And I think we can probably have the same discussion on the other 2 lots that are on the agenda today. So I think that's a great suggestion. Let's do that, but bring it up the next couple of weeks so we can move this forward. I mean, I will congratulate the builder for proposing, what look like pretty decent houses, and I think it'll make the neighborhood look really nice once they're put up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Turner.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Rudin here. If we don't approve this tonight, and this goes on until the end of the year, are these lots subject to SB 9 where they can be split again, or are they exempt from it? Do you know?
I'm not aware of any exemption in SB 9 that would, carve out, the city's hillside subdivision, hillside and scenic corridor areas. So I don't see any strong argument we could assert that these would not be subject to SB 9.
Okay.
All right, any further comments? Ms. Lawler.
I just want to thank the architect for presenting some really nice designs, and I appreciate your willingness to work with us and the Site and Architecture Commission and their recommendations. So bear with us and be patient because we all want the best result possible.
Great, thank you. Mr. Makachek, did you have further comment?
Yes. So when we come to a decision, we either approve, deny, or we can continue. So if everything appears okay and the only item left is looking at a red line to see if there are material differences, then we could continue this item to the November 2nd, which is the date certain meeting. That's a question for our attorney.
Yes, you could continue this item to November 2nd. You can't adjourn an item from a regular meeting to a special meeting, but you can adjourn it to any other regular meeting.
And to clarify what Mr. Makachek said, we can, and I wanted to kind of put this out there with a question mark at the end. We can approve, we can deny, we can continue, but at the next meeting, we could condition this upon specific either changes or clarifications, similar to what we did with item 1, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, if you have additional design changes that you would like to see implemented, it's not atypical for a site development permit to be approved, subject to conditions of approval that the construction drawings incorporate like whatever, design change you would like to have. So that's certainly possible. With respect to, tree removal requirements, you can condition them that they be, approved subject to relocation of certain, vegetation or what have you. So yes.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Turner, you've got your
I
hand up.
just wanted to make sure we're giving our planning commissioner enough time to be able to redline all these 4 lots by the time of the next meeting. Ms. Perkins, does that give you enough time?
I will work with the applicant to do that. That is a bit of a tight schedule in terms of making sure that we can also turn around an updated staff report to the council. But I'm sure that the applicant will, make the time this week, hopefully, to get this done with me. And the November 2nd date we can make work if that's what the council chooses.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mekachek.
Then you've already had the public hearing on this, correct? So could I make a motion to continue this item to the November 2nd meeting where we'd like to receive a red line from showing the differences from the tentative map and that the applicant work with the city planner to do this expeditiously.
Yeah, let's go ahead and Ms. Waller just pointed out to me that the applicant has their hand up. So let's hear from them before we act on that. Let's recognize Mr. Zazueta briefly.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. In doing this project for my client, I reviewed all of the documents that were previously approved by this council, and we are actually providing more landscape screening along the highway corridor and between the lots and all of our neighbors. We have met with all of our neighbors. We have spoken to all of our neighbors. We have spoken with Mr. Jeans next door to make sure that our landscaping is contiguous with his landscaping. We have done everything that we felt that we needed to do based on your original approval of this project, and I'm just kind of a little taken back that that when you take the landscape plan that you approved originally and I put my landscape next to it, we have more landscaping there for screening. We understood the issues with this. Ms. Seaborn was very instrumental in making sure that we followed everything that was approved by this council. And so we just are asking for your assistance to help us to move forward with this project at this time, because we have we're only required to add 2 new trees on lot 1, but we're adding 4 new trees, large 24-inch box trees to provide screening. And I mean, I could go on and on for the other 2 lots once we get to them, but the screening and the trees and the talking with the neighbors and everything, we have done everything that we felt that we were supposed to do to make sure that you and the council was comfortable with this project. And it's just we're just kind of taken aback that that we're going to be, you're considering even continuing us to another meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zazueta. I guess the point that certainly I'm bringing forward is that this is coming to us for the first time here. Looks like certainly I want some additional time to look at it. We're talking about some of the redlining. If you want to redline and help the city show the additional screening and the additional things that have been done, that will certainly be very helpful. I don't think council is trying to get in the way of this. I think overall looks like a project that has been well thought out and is attractive and makes good use of the land. But it is complicated, and we're looking at three things simultaneously on a complicated subdivision. So we're going to try to be as expeditious as possible. Mr. Mekachek.
I have zero interest in delaying this at all. Absolutely zero. I have 100% interest in making sure it complies with everything that the council went through with the applicant when the subdivision was approved. And if the architect designer says that they've gone overboard on everything, then it can go on the consent calendar at the next meeting. 2 weeks is fine. If everything's okay, as you represent to us, then you can proceed knowing that it would be approved. I think that the continuance is merely allows us to show our faith, but make sure that it is what was expected. And it was a difficult meeting at both site and architecture and at the city council. And I have to respect the process that went through.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. So I think Mr. Mekachek had moved to go ahead and continue this item 2 to the next meeting with the comments about getting us the additional information, helping make our job easy, helping Ms. Perkins with her job. And I think the applicant will be interested in accomplishing that. So I'll second his motion to continue this. And let's go ahead and take it forward.
Motion by Councilmember Mekachek with a second by Mayor Luther. Councilmember Charter,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Mayor Potem Elahi,
Aye.
and Mayor Luther.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, let's move to item 3. This is for the site development permit for lot number 2. Do we have a staff report, Ms. Perkins?
Yes, thank you very much. This is an application for lot 2 at 16219 Seaborn Court. This house is, as proposed, is technically a 2-story house, as the lower level does not meet the zoning code definition of a basement. I realized as part of our last discussion, I had mentioned that 3,000 square feet is the limit in the zoning district for a 2-story house. But the code does have additional provisions when the lot area exceeds the minimum lot size of the zoning district, that additional building area can be is allowed. And so that's why you see this house proposed is 3,362 square feet. The lower level of the basement, I'm sorry, not the basement, the lower level, the technical first floor, is an attached accessory dwelling unit. And also, as we discussed with the previous item, when the Site and Architectural Commission recommended approval of this project, it did include a similar condition from lot 1, that the fence in this lot is technically a fence and not a sound wall, match the material at lot 1 so that the adjacent property owner has a consistent fence/sound wall across their backyard. This application does also include the removal of 7 trees, and the Site and Architectural Commission also recommended that those replacement trees, some be located in the front yard to again provide a shade canopy over the new private street, as well as species that will not cause damage to the pavement in the future. And that concludes the staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council questions? Seeing none at this time, let's go ahead and open this to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to comment on item number 3, the Site 2 development permit? If so, please raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing none, we'll close this to public comment, bring it back to council discussion. Council members? Seeing nobody jumping in, I'm going to go ahead and add my comments here, which are similar to what I mentioned the first time around. On this one, my specific concerns, and this will be perhaps if we follow the same path with this as we did with the last one, the concerns that I noticed on this are, number one, the setback from the Arley property. And obviously we have the issue of legal setbacks, but we also have the issue of the building envelopes as were presented to us when we were presented the subdivision map. My concern as I looked at the plans here is that this is a much more modern building than and design, especially with the living area, the lawn behind it, which is a huge change, shall we say, from the prior use of that property, especially as it faces the Arley properties. It was kind of wildland back there before, with older trees and natural California materials to some extent on the slope. And what we see now is highly landscaped as it faces the Arley properties, similar to the landscaping on the front. It's very appealing and clean and California to me from the front. But when we start talking about putting in green lawn area on what was previously a beautiful hillside, I think that may be taking it too far. It's one of the reasons why I bring up grading, because if that green lawn area is following the slope, then it's not a useful lawn area probably for the outdoor living space that's being proposed. And I believe the drawing showed it as relatively flat. If it's being graded and then we're adding lawn in 2021 in California for the convenience of a homeowner who wants an outdoor living space that is then going to be backed up against another backyard, I see that as problematic and very unnatural to what was there before. So I've got concerns about that, and both from a grading and from a natural environment point of view. I don't know if other council members will have those same concerns, but that's something that I want to look at as we compare it to the subdivision map and what we were working with before. So those are my thoughts. Other council member comments? Looks like everybody's tired and blood sugar is low. Okay, I would, Mr. Mikachuk.
I hear your comments, Mayor Leupold, regarding what was there before and what's there now. I do not believe that lawns are appropriate in this day and age, and I think we're going to see fewer lawns. The only constructive comment that I could offer would be that that hillside area, if you will, include some natural vegetation that you would see on the hillside, so that it'd be like some sage or manzanita or something like that, so that it would soften it and it wouldn't be a bright green lawn. And perhaps the applicant could consider that. Having said that, if the plans are virtually the same now as to what was presented in the past, then I would have to say that, I would have to vote in favor of it.
Thank you. And I would just suggest that what I recall hearing in that last meeting, and may have to listen back to it, was the applicant talking about being very sensitive to the look of the hillside and what people would be looking at. And certainly I had the impression from that we were not talking about flat lawns and those changes. But we can come back to that by both listening to what the applicant said before and what we were talking about at that time. I know Ms. Turner was very concerned also about the trees in the hillside as in general, and especially as we get to lot 3, but that's not what we're talking about at the moment. Mr. Mekachuk.
I would also like to say that it looks like the applicant has worked very hard to keep the house height as low as possible so that there's more view of the hillside from the properties on Arley, and I commend the design for that.
Thank you. One other concern that I wanted to raise, and this is for the applicant if they're looking at helping us understand, looking at what may be potentially even an improvement or a change from what was shown to us on the subdivision map. And that is the issue of the bioswales and the dedicated drainage easements that were very much part of the landscaping. If that has been complied with, and has not changed, pointing that out, how that's compliant would be helpful to me. If it has been changed, pointing out what's been changed and why that we should consider that non-material or an improvement will be very helpful, because the bioswales and the drainage were huge issues last time, and dedicating those easements was critical to our approval. And it looked to me like that might be different or being challenged by the building envelopes and the landscaping that's there. I may be incorrect about that, and I'm happy to have that pointed out to me as we move forward. Any other comments, or otherwise I would either we can do this the same way as last time, or I can make the motion this time to continue this to the November 2nd meeting.
I will make a motion to continue this to November 2nd.
Second.
I get the motion from Councilmember Turner and the second from Councilmember Mekachuk. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And just before we vote on that, do we have the applicant wanting to make any statements or comments on this project? I don't recall if we did that.
Oh, it looks like, thank you for checking. It looks like Ms. Seaborn does have her hand up. Let's go ahead before we vote and hear from Ms. Seaborn. Ms. Radcliffe, can we recognize Ms. Seaborn?
Are you there?
There you are.
Oh, great. Hello, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for hearing me today. I just wanted to clarify a few things that have been really concerning when listening to this meeting. First of all, I just want to elaborate that everything on the past tentative map is absolutely there. Nothing has changed. What has changed are some small lot line adjustments from the 2 lots in order to make the back neighbors happier. We are in full compliance, like I said, with the tentative map, the first tentative map. And in addition, when we're talking to the back neighbors, they have had different ideas about what they wanted, and they wanted to express that to me, and they said that they were going to write a letter. I'm not sure if you've received it, but the one that's directly behind on lot 3, the one you're reviewing right now, he absolutely would like to see some grass area and some minor landscaping, because he wants to have a pool and he doesn't want to have a lot of shade on his property. So we told him that we would be happy to work with them, but we're also working with council. But I just want you to know that that he is absolutely in favor of having lower trees and less shrubs, like I said, again, so that he can have a pool in his backyard. Behind lot 2, they are also in full agreement and has been spoken to and support the project. That's why no one's here tonight, because we've worked really hard to spend a lot of time with them reviewing everything. On lot 1 and lot 2, the first and second, again, the neighbors are also in complete compliance, and they're ecstatic about moving forward and getting the project going. They're very upset about the delays. And we're trying to move this thing forward. I'm hearing comments about hillside property. This is not a hillside property. It is in a neighborhood. It's zoned R8, which is 8,000 square foot lots. This is a lot larger than that. I believe they're in the 12,000 square foot lots, the two back. The front lot was the smaller of the three, which is around 10,200 lots. I don't believe you can redline a drawings like you're talking about, but I think your planner is really up to date as far as the lot line adjustment that was made. And I know that she can kind of review that with you if there were some questions. My concern hearing was about the grading. There's actually a reduction of grading. So everything that we've done has really been an improvement to the existing, since we know clearly what it is that everyone was looking for. And we just wanted to make all those things that we've discussed over and over even more evident. The trees that you're talking about in the back, I wanted to remind you, if you have seen them recently, at the time that the report was made, all of them were in poor condition. Some of them were in fair condition, but most of them are in poor condition. What that looks like is the barks are coming off. The trees are split. Some of them are half falling on the ground. They're trees that you wouldn't even think about taking down. And they're small trees, slightly over 6 inches. So they're not these beautiful, majestic trees that you would have found next door on Tony's property. So I hope that kind of explains a few things that's going on. Sometimes people do want small lawn areas. It doesn't have to be actual grass. It can be fake lawn, just so that they can have a little space back there. But it is, remember, a neighborhood property. It is not a hillside property. And so that's what we're building towards. Are there any questions for me?
Mr. Mekachek.
Thank you. That is super helpful, Ms. Seaborn. My question for you is, I understand that you've worked with the neighbors, etc. So I think what you're hearing from us is that we'd like to approve this, but we would like to just make sure that it is totally consistent, and we as council members have to do our due diligence on that and make sure that, to the best of our belief, it is in fact consistent. And so my question for you is, if we were to put this on the consent calendar for approval at the next meeting on November the 2nd, would that be an undue delay for you, or is it super important that we approve this tonight?
We really expected, since we got a full approval from the Site and Architecture Committee that we worked diligently with. They were all in favor, and we would not like to be delayed. We have a schedule that we're trying to hit. There are some winter requirements that we're trying to be sensitive to the neighbors that we don't want to get into. So any more delay at this point would not be good.
All right, let's go ahead and return this to the council. I think we do have a motion and a second and ready to move forward on voting on that. I guess I just would comment that based on what Ms. Seaborn has said, it would be extremely helpful. I know that we saw that the neighbors adjacent to 1 and 2, I believe it was them, offered their comments in support. If we had clear comments and support from both of the Arley neighbors, that they have looked at the plans and carefully considered the views and the effect on their properties, and that they are supportive, that's going to go a long way to alleviating our concerns. And I do understand that you've worked with the neighbors. That's wonderful. part of this was previous issues had been raised by the neighbors. And so if the current neighbors there are fully supportive and that message is coming to us, that's going to have an effect for me certainly, and make it much more likely that we could go forward if they're happy with the landscaping, happy with the fence proposals, and so forth. Then it is just a matter of completing the due diligence, and we can do that pretty quickly. Mr. Mekachek.
Since I asked the question, heard the response, my only concern is just verifying that what was said before and what was agreed to before is actually in the plans. And Ms. Seaborn, if you are totally confident in that, then you should be totally confident that we will be approving this on as a consent item at the next meeting. And you should be able to proceed, I would think, without any risk of delay. So I understand what you're saying. You'd like to move ahead. There is some new information, like if what you were describing would have been said at the front end of the meeting, then that would have been helpful to us. But I would still like to see it identify what the changes are, and if they're only trivial, then by definition they're only trivial and it's no big deal. And with respect to there is no such thing as a red line, well, you know what? Just take a pen that's red and draw a little cloud around where a change was, and we can see one to the other, and we're good to go. Let's keep it easy, simple, and fast. Be on the consent calendar, and we're good to go. Those are my thoughts, Council.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and vote. I think we've got the motion in the second here for this item.
Okay. Councilmember Waller,
Yes.
Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Mayor Potem Elahi,
Yes.
and Mayor Nichols.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving now to item 4. This is the site development permit and tree removal permit for site for lot number 3. Ms. Perkins, staff report comments?
Yes, thank you. This is an application for this is a single-story house. The lower level of this house does meet our code's definition for a basement, so it is considered a one-story house. The proposal is for a 3,497 square foot house with an attached accessory dwelling unit in the basement. When this item was heard at the Site and Architectural Commission, they recommended approval of the project with a couple of conditions, again, similar to the other projects. Sorry, I apologize. The application also includes removal of 9 trees on the site. So the recommendation from the Site and Architectural Commission included replacement trees, a minimum of 9 24-inch box trees. They did specify a minimum of 2 Japanese maples and 2 red maple trees to be planted on the lot. And again, consistent with the other applications, that the replacement trees be native trees and provide a shade canopy over the street without species that would cause damage to the pavement in the future. There was just one minor, I guess, oversight, I'll call it, in the design of this project, in that the lot coverage was slightly exceeded. And so the applicant proposed to address that by reducing the covered patio in the backyard by 3 feet. And then that would bring down the structural coverage to below the 40% maximum for this lot. And that concludes my staff report, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Any questions up front from council members? Ms. Lawler.
Thank you. My question for our city planner is, has that correction been made on the plans that were given to us?
It was not. So what you see as the back covered patio would be 3 feet less in depth. And as part of the current recommendation from staff and the Site and Architectural Commission, that would be verified on the building permit.
All right, so continuing this to the next meeting would allow for an opportunity to do that, correct?
If we could please confirm with the architect that he would be able to, complete the revised plans in that time,
Yes.
but yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Mr. Zazueta has his hand up, so let's go ahead and recognize him since he can speak to that.
Mr. Mayor and council members, that changes would not be an issue to get adjusted for the next, for you guys to see the change to the plans.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and open this to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to be recognized regarding item number 4 on the agenda tonight? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will close this to public comment and return it to council discussion. I guess I wanted to jump in on this one up front and then point this out to the applicant who may be helping us with the red pen, that I wanted to make sure, because and I will be looking very closely at this to make sure that the what I'm loosely terming the easement for the flood control and the bioswales are either equal to or better than what was made a condition of the subdivision map. I noticed that they are different on this, and that may be due to engineering, it may be due to other considerations. Want to make sure that that is all good and that it's going to control the water flow, because there are very significant water flow issues to the Arley properties, which needed to be addressed with that, with those design elements. It probably would have been easier to simply gather the water and move it across Arley and into the sewer system, but that wasn't going to be a possibility with the prior residents there. So the water collection and the bioswales were an important part of this project. They may well be addressed on this, but what can be added to point that out to us will be helpful to me. Any other council member comments? Mr. Mekachuk.
I was on the Site and Architectural Commission previously when we looked at this, and I will acknowledge the Ms. Seaborn's comments regarding the condition of those trees. So I have no problem with the removal and the replacement of any of the trees. And in fact, I think that's super helpful for the property. I have no other comments on this.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to address to Ms. Seaborn that certainly the design is going to be a great improvement, and having this built out and done properly is going to be a wonderful resolution to that lot, which has been an eyesore for a long time. I understand what you're saying about the trees and the condition of them. At the same time, I am concerned that the lot has gone downhill and that things were not being maintained there. Obviously, there were concerns, probably lack of water and other issues, lack of maintenance of those trees. They're now in that position of not being attractive and probably not being able to be saved very well. So I think as a condition of approval, putting in some really good quality stuff and replacement trees and landscaping is going to be critical. So related to that, I wanted to suggest to staff that when we bring the draft amended resolutions back for these next time, especially if we're looking at it on the consent calendar, my suggestion would be to include all of the conditions recommended by Site and Architecture in our draft resolution so that we don't have to be adding conditions to them because it is most likely, I would say, that council is going to strictly follow those recommendations of Site and Architecture. So I think if we can have those in the resolutions when they come to us, make our job a lot easier. So that's my input. Any other council member comments? Or do we have a motion to continue this to the November 2nd meeting?
Motion to continue this to November 2nd.
And Mr. Mekachek, a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lowen,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi. Mayor Pro Tem. And Mayor.
Aye.
Aye. And Mayor Luggold.
Yes,
Okay, that motion passes 5-0.
thank you. Okay, moving now to new business. This is item 1 of new business, an ordinance introduction regarding changes to the solid organic waste and recyclable materials, chapter 6.09 and 6.10. Do we have a staff report on this? Looks like Mr. Leonardis. There you are.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was hoping that Engineer Khan would be with us on the line this evening to cover this one.
Oh,
as you can see,
actually, Mr. Leonardis, she is, and she's got her hand raised to be recognized. She's on the participants section. So let's go ahead and recognize her, and that'll make your job easy. So, Ms. Khan. Let's see if, let's see, can't be here. Zoom client is too old. Okay, so it looks like her Zoom client has not brought her in to the meeting. Are we able to recognize her on the attendees line and let her speak? That's looking to be a no.
Let me find out from the IT. Give me 1 second.
Okay, yeah, let's take a second and see if we can do that. Okay, alternatively, Ms. Khan could call in, or do we not have that ability to bring her in by phone?
Yeah, unfortunately, because her Zoom client is an older version, we're unable to allow her to talk.
Hello, Mayor, council members, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we got her promoted. Excellent.
I am so very sorry about that. Good evening. If you can hear me clearly, I will move forward with the staff report on this item.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Senate Bill number 1383 was signed into law in September of 2016, establishing targets to reduce organic waste disposal and increase edible food recovery in the state of California. SB 1383 seeks to accomplish these target levels by recycling or diverting organic waste from being sent to landfills for disposal. Among its many provisions, the law mandates that jurisdictions are required to provide organics collection and recycling services to all customers within their boundaries. SB 1383 also requires all jurisdictions to implement a mandatory organic recycling ordinance by January 1st, 2022, which is the item before you this evening. As a reminder, the city does not manage its own waste services. The city is a member of the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority, JPA, which I will refer to in this report as the authority, which manages the collection, disposal, recycling, and landfill diversion of solid waste originating in the city, along with the cities of Campbell, Saratoga, and the town of Los Gatos. The authority is currently under contract with West Valley Collection and Recycling to provide collection, disposal, and recycling services for the authority jurisdictions. The city's current solid waste ordinance, chapter 6.09, titled Garbage, was adopted in 1962. The ordinance has been amended twice for minor items, but otherwise has not been updated or amended since its adoption. The proposed ordinance before you tonight is based on a model ordinance provided by Cal Recycle and modified by city staff in consultation with the authority in the county of Santa Clara. The new ordinance is intended to simplify the municipal code and reflect changes in the law, including provisions in AB 1826, AB 341, and particularly SB 1383. The staff report provides a summary of all the sections in the ordinance, some of which are less applicable to Monte Sereno since there are no commercial businesses in the city. I would like to highlight a few sections. The first section being 020, which are the requirements for single family residences. That being they have to subscribe to the collection services provided by the city, and they are also required to separate their waste into the green for the organics and blue for recycling waste. Section 080, excuse me, the self-hauler requirements require those who haul their own waste, such as landscape contractors, are allowed to do so as long as they take their materials to an appropriate facility and maintain their records. And then section 100, prohibited practices, includes language that was previously included in the city solid waste ordinance that was not part of the SB 1383 model ordinance, which include prohibitions on maintaining nuisance conditions on individual properties and prohibit unlawful methods of waste disposal, such as dumping. The council received an amended ordinance late yesterday. It made a few changes to sections, specifically section 040 waivers that made it clarify that the waivers are for multifamily units or commercial businesses, and then changes to sections 050 and 060 for edible food generators and food recovery service providers to make the county of Santa Clara able to be do inspections and keep records on behalf of the city. As far as direct impacts of this ordinance to Monte Sereno residents, as stated previously, SB 1383 mandates that jurisdictions are required to provide organics collection and recycling services. For Monte Sereno residential customers, this will be implemented by allowing food scraps and food soil paper to be placed in the green landscape container that's already included in waste services. Later this year, kitchen pails will be distributed to each of the residential customers for food scraps, so you can transfer those into your green container once those services begin. In recent months, the authority has developed outreach materials regarding organics collection, which the city has put out on its social media accounts. The authority has also updated their website to include frequently answered questions, ask questions, excuse me, regarding SB 1383, which is attachment 2 of the staff report. In April, the Solid Waste Authority executed an amendment with WVCNR to meet the requirements of SB 1383. This resulted in an increase of rates for the 35-gallon residential customer, which is, or for all customers, but particularly the most common rate is a 35-gallon residential rate in the city of Monte Sereno by about $3.50 per month, and that came effective this past July. And there's another increase of approximately $2 per month effective next July. This evening, in addition to city staff, Mr. Rudin and myself, Marva Sheehan, the executive director of the authority, is also in attendance to answer any questions you may have regarding the ordinance or provisions of 1383 in general. And this concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khan. Okay, any questions at the front end? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open this for public comment. If we have any members of the public wishing to be recognized on this item, please raise your hand to speak. Seeing none, we will close this to public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion. Mr. Mekachuk.
Thank you. I'm the City of Monte Sereno's representative on West Valley Solid Waste JPA. And I know that this has been a tremendous amount of work for the JPA and the executive director. And I'd like to recognize that. And going through this, I think there's only two locations that I'm kind of wondering about if they'll be affected by this. And one is Dave's Avenue School and their generation of organic material from lunches, etc. And then the other is the church. And if we could just have a brief comment on that by the executive director, that would be great.
Yes,
Great.
good evening. This is Marva Sheehan, the executive director, and those two entities are what they will be under 1383, so they will be provided with organics collection separate, and more than likely in a 95-gallon cart or something like that, depending on what their volumes would be. WVCNR will be talking with them to come up with the proper subscription levels.
Thank you. I don't think I have any more questions. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members, questions, comments? Ms. Lawler?
I was hoping that I would imagine that we would post a link on the website to the West Valley FAQs, since it's quite cumbersome to go through all of the things that we can and can't put in this pail. So I thought it would be really great for our residents to have a cheat sheet, either on the website, definitely on the website, but maybe even perhaps once this resolution, once we have the second reading of this, we can send out maybe even a postcard notification or minimum an email notification. It would be very helpful for me, I know personally, if I had it on my refrigerator, what I couldn't put in this. So I'm just wondering if that's possible. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Good. Excellent suggestion. Any other council member comments? Do we have a motion? Mr. Makachek, I think you had your hand up first.
I'll second that.
Okay, do I need to introduce the ordinance before we vote?
Mr. Rudin, technically speaking, what's the procedure for this today, for this new ordinance? It looks like we may have lost Mr. Rudin along the way.
Okay, I'm going to read it just for the sake of doing it.
Yep, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, ordinance number NS-227, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Monte Sereno repealing Chapter 6.09 garbage and enacting Chapter 6.10 solid waste, organic waste, and recyclable materials to Title 6 sanitation and health, and amending Section 2.05.170 of the Monte Sereno Municipal Code, Chapter 2.05, purchasing and bidding procedures of the Monte Sereno Municipal Code regarding compliance with SB 1383. I have a motion from Councilmember Makachek and a second from Councilmember Lawler. Councilmember Turner.
Amen.
Councilmember Makachek.
Aye.
Councilmember Lawler.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Aye.
And Mayor Luther.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0.
All right, thank you, everybody. Mr. Rudin indicated he was having laptop trouble, and he will presumably be back when he gets that resolved. Okay, next item is item 2 of new business. This is discussion and direction regarding residential permit parking zones. This is simply a discussion item, but let's go ahead and discuss it. So staff report, please.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. Good evening again, Mayor and Council members. Jessica Kahn, City Engineer. By the request of Council, staff has researched the current implementation of residential permit parking within the city limits. In general, public street parking is regulated by the California Vehicle Code. Under the code, the city has the discretion to enact residential parking restrictions and permit programs that provide parking privileges to residents. Per state law, new residential permit parking zones are established by resolution of the City Council. The City Council previously enacted Ordinance NS-70 in May 1990, which is now Chapter 4.06 in the Municipal Code titled Residential Permit Parking, and that is attached to the staff report. This chapter sets the process for issuing parking permits and enforcing restrictions of established parking districts. The development of this particular ordinance was in response to a petition by the residents of Valley Oak Drive, which is a short street directly off of Winchester Boulevard. Parking in this area had been severely impacted by the development of a multi-unit residential complex on Winchester Boulevard in the town of Los Gatos that happened to have a pedestrian access onto Valley Oak Drive. This residential permit parking area was established by resolution in May 1990. However, the permit parking has not been enforced. No new permits have been issued since the city contracted with the town of Los Gatos for police services in 1995. If the council decides to move forward with the establishment of additional permit parking areas, staff recommends the development of a standard process that involves recommendations by city engineer, the Better Streets Commission, prior to coming to council for approval and adoption. And an example process is attached to the staff report. Potential fiscal impacts of establishing additional permit parking areas include administrative costs associated with processing permits, costs for physical permits and sign installation. Some of these costs may be recovered by permit fees if they are added to the city's fee schedule. Staffing and enforcement of parking permit zones would also need to be considered and discussed in light of the city being contracted with the town of Los Gatos for these services. The town does currently have many residential parking permit areas that they do enforce for the town of Los Gatos. And I believe the police department also issues the permits for those parking areas, but they do not currently do those services for the city. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions at the front end? Ms. Turner.
I wanted to know, in your opinion, what it would cost, the incremental cost to our police department to have to do this, considering that at this point in time, we only have 3 dispatchers.
That may be a better question for Mr. Leonardis, since I am not in any way involved with the police contract.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Turner. And I would actually have to contact the police department and find out the answer for you after the meeting.
Okay.
And any other questions up front? I guess my question is a clarifying one, which is simply that it sounds, Engineer Khan, like we're discussing putting the procedures in place should residents come forth in the future making these requests. We're not actually contemplating implementing any parking restricted parking areas at this time. Is that right?
Correct. The process that already exists in our code, this would just be it already exists in our code that we allow it. It's just a process of determining where to establish new zones, but we're not talking about anywhere in particular this evening.
All right, thank you.
So
All
what
right.
are we going to approve this evening then? Or what are we talking about tonight? I mean, what's the process? Do we vote on anything, or
No,
is it?
yeah, this is simply a discussion item, Ms. Turner, and it's having that discussion. But we have as Engineer Khan pointed out, we have the possibility of such an item in our code, but we don't have a process for doing it. And so the discussion tonight is, shall we go forward creating the process, and what would that process look like, I believe. Ms. Lawler, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the intent to bring this to council was to discuss it and consider, kind of anticipating what might happen in the future with housing density, right? So we're already addressing privacy and safety issues with our objective standards and with our new fence ordinance. And so it should follow that we start thinking about what parking or street congestion implications there may be in the future. There may be none, but there most likely will be some once multifamily housing gets built. And why not have a much more concise and dedicated process that would allow residents to approach and request permit parking. And I really like this new policy that our engineer put together that includes her as well as the Better Streets Commission. So it will be a very well thought out process. That's really the intent, was to make sure, and I think we can all agree, we want to make sure that residents can continue to enjoy their properties, particularly with what's coming.
And Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we can discuss it. I'm just thinking it may be a little bit premature. I mean, we probably want the residents to be involved if they're going to do any kind of parking issues, because what it may be 3 years from now may be a different issue than what it is today, and we don't want another round of somebody getting upset about not being able to park somewhere, or somebody parking somewhere and some neighbors getting upset about that. And then we have a problem of policing it in any case. So I would probably table this for discussion, maybe, when the first multifamily zone planning comes up, I think that may be a good time to consider putting permits around.
Yeah, Ms. Lawler.
Yeah, I would just add to that. No, I agree. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen today or tomorrow. I do think that, I mean, no one's going to actually ask for it for a while, but I think the policy probably could have been updated, since the previous policy was under the guise of the city clerk. And so this new policy, just updating it to include the city engineer and the Better Streets Commission and putting it under their domain, I think is probably the wise thing to do, just to have. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Rudin, were you trying to check in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's little questions about process, and, with respect to a policy, city policy can only regulate how, the city directs its own staff. So even if there isn't an express policy, residents can certainly always come and petition the council or petition the Better Streets Committee, directly under public comment anytime they want to address these issues. So even though we may have a policy that says that this is how we'll process, requests that come to staff, and, we'll route them via the Better Streets Commission, et cetera, nothing is going to prevent the citizens from coming and trying to address council members directly if they really have concerns.
Great. Yeah, I actually had looked at this, the draft outline in the staff report, and I think I think it was an excellent proposal. It wasn't suggesting that we be imposing anything on anyone, first of all, but it does outline how a street or a neighborhood would go about making the request, what the threshold would be in terms of the number of people in that neighborhood, what number of blocks or lengths of streets would have to be involved to meet the various thresholds. I think those ideas and putting that out there so that everyone knows in advance what the basic rules are for the basic and normal review process would be a great thing to have in place. Then we don't have to think about it. If the Rose Avenue neighborhood decides that this is something they want because of spillover or development or density, then the Rose Avenue people can go and talk to each other, and there's a process for how they bring this to the city council. That way, we're not seeing this with one or two residents coming to us at a time. Instead, they know exactly what the thresholds would be and what the process would be. So I thought it was an excellent proposal, and kind of my comment in terms of the discussion point is I think we should go forward with it and get it in place, and then we don't have to think about it anymore for a while till something comes up. So other comments? Otherwise, I think we've had the discussion, and in terms of direction, I would certainly be suggesting that we move forward with the outline version that that Engineer Khan has prepared. If she feels that that is a good outline for us to work from, I'd be happy to move ahead with that at whatever time it can be presented to us more formally. But in terms of direction, I think we need at least nods by a few council members. I see Ms. Lawler nodding. We need at least one more nod to call it a consensus here. Or are we hearing from council members that they don't want to move forward on this? Mr. Elahi, Ms. Turner, Mr. Mekachek, worth moving forward with it?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if that commenter was on the line as well for the public comments.
Yeah, I think we opened for public comment, but let's make sure that I do that. I appreciate the reminder. Let's go ahead and ensure that we open this for public comment. Do we have any comments by members of the public? Anyone wishing to be heard on the issue of permit parking zone procedures? Seeing none, I'll close that to public comment and come back to Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand the need for going forward. It might be helpful, but if you're going to do that, then I think you have to look at everything else. You'd have to look at how disabled parking would be affected or not affected, and whether separate zones have to be created for that, separate permits have to be looked at. So maybe a broader brush with which you have to paint the whole structure. And I would also like to get feedback from neighbors where this is going to happen to see whether they're for it or not for it. So that was my reason for saying we need to wait for the issue to be ripe, I guess, as they say. And otherwise, it's like you're renting an opinion on something that's really not ready to be litigated.
Again, Mr. Elahi, I think it's worth looking at this. This is simply designing the procedure by which a neighborhood would bring it forward. It's not suggesting that we have permit parking or not have permit parking. It's the procedure by which it would come forward. So, and it looked to me like it was a well thought out procedure so that staff would know when someone came and said, why don't we have permit parking? Or how do I go about getting permit parking in my neighborhood? They would say, hey, we have a procedure for how many neighbors have to come together, how you present that, how you go through better streets. And then we have that in place rather than simply saying, well, we're allowed to have permit parking, but we don't know how we go about creating it. So,
Understood.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes, I am just a bit hesitant to do this now. And the reason I am is because I know that SB 9 and SB 10 are going to be implemented in 2022. And I don't know what the impact is of more density housing on our streets. So I want to wait until we see how things are going to work out with the new bills. And that's my only reason for saying no to this one.
Mr. Mekachek.
I will concur with Councilmember Turner, and I think that we can, if and when required, we can move forward very quickly on this. We're not the first city in California to implement permit parking, and I think that in terms of our scarce resources and mind share, I don't think that it warrants putting this on our plates to even think about for the next little while. As Councilmember Turner said, let's see how things start to shake out, and then we'll be able to address it. It's on our radar screen. We know about it, and I can't support moving forward with this this time.
All right, Ms. Lawler.
I just wanted to say, just to be clear, this is a discussion about updating the existing policy, and it's not about implementing parking zones at this time. Having lived on a very busy street in the past and having had to park my car down the street or around the corner and not in front of my house, I know that seems like a long way off from us for right now, but there are areas in our neighborhood that already are having a little bit more congestion on their streets. So this is really just, this is just being preemptive. This is just being anticipatory. It's not saying we're going to build or approve, permit zones at this time. It's simply just making sure the process is clear and it's just embedded, and that we don't have to worry about it when it does happen. That's where I was coming from. I'd rather be proactive rather than reactive. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I'm with Ms. Lawler on this. I think that if we take the time to read what staff was talking about, it makes sense to have a policy and a procedure in place. I think that makes staff's life actually easier, and then we'll make the process and bringing it to Better Streets and Council easier when it arises. And it won't arise until a neighborhood decides that it's something they want to bring forward. So again, I'm for putting the procedure in place so that it makes life easier. I think that's kind of why it's on calendar here. It certainly is something we can table and then wait till it comes up. But then we don't have a procedure. We've got a law that says we can have permit parking, but we have no procedure about how we go about having neighborhoods bring that to us. What is the threshold that the neighborhood needs to have in terms of how many neighbors and what areas and so on and so forth. So I think this actually, again, is an improvement that would help our staff out. I think it's well on its way to being completed, but we're hearing hesitancy on the part of two people, and I think Mayor Pro Tem Elahi has the third nod as to whether it's worthwhile to move forward putting procedures in place or not. And so we've got two nods yes and two nods no. So Mayor Pro Tem Elahi, if you have an opinion, weigh in.
I suggest we pass on it for now, because I mean, I'd rather have the street come by and say, okay, I want this done. It hasn't happened since 1990, and the question before me right now is whether we should revoke the parking permit that we have on that street, since nobody seems to bother with it and nobody seems to even enforce it. So I would wait on it.
Okay, well, that's direction. So I guess for now, staff can put this aside and pull it out when necessary. So let's move on to the next item, which is item 3, which is regarding the new records retention schedule for the city of Monte Sereno, superseding resolution number 3541. Do we have a staff report on this?
Yes, good evening. Sorry about that. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Michelle Radcliffe, City Clerk. I'm here to report the city's updated records retention schedule. In November of 2013, the City Council adopted resolution number 3541, which amended our city's records retention schedule. At the time, it was to allow electronic retention of building permits. And we haven't revised the council since. We haven't revised the schedule since. Typically, many agencies review the records retention schedule every 5 to 7 years to ensure that the retention periods are consistent with state law and code citations are accurate. In consultation with the city attorney, the city clerk updated the city's retention schedule to provide a more robust and descriptive schedule to assist staff with the retention and destruction of city records. At the beginning of the year, the city's records management program was included in the council's 2021 goals, and the city clerk was tasked with updating the schedule and overhauling the city's records management program. Staff recommends that the city council approve this new records retention schedule and supersede resolution number 3541. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Any questions? Nobody get their hand up quickly. Ms. Lawler.
Thank you. Do we have, I'm assuming we have a lot of records that are permanent, that are hard copies, and are they stored somewhere?
Yes, along with the records management program, I have retained services of an offsite storage company. With the approval of this retention schedule, the next process would be to identify which records can be purged, which records which hard copies need to be saved, and what records can be digitized. So we're in the process, but yes, we will be storing permanent records that we need to have physical copies of offsite to a safe location.
Okay, and one follow-up question, is everything going forward digitized? Or are there also hard copies as well?
Depending on what the record is. Depending on what the record is, most of the records would be digitized, but there are some records that we do need to keep physical copies of.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Turner.
What are the challenges with digitizing all of our documents?
The one challenge that I'm seeing, just looking at the project as a whole, is our electronic document management system. We're currently using a vendor entitled BMI, and from what I understand, we hired them for the sole purpose of planning records, the plans and whatnot, and kind of their business model was that, and with the need of more digitized record, they kind of expanded what their business model was, but they haven't kept up with, I guess, the technology. In other cities I've used other repositories like Laserfish. And that's a conversation that I would need to have with the city manager to see if we need to change our electronic document management system. That's easier, more user-friendly than what we currently have, and works with iCompass. So that's one issue. And then the second issue is just determining what we have. I took on this role and this project knowing that we need to inventory and just figure out what documents we have, and just really setting up a system in place, because we don't have that right now.
Can I make a further comment? Rather than throwing the documents away, I would suggest that we find a better software app that will actually handle all this. There's plenty of them out there.
Yes, there is. And it's not budgeted in this fiscal year, but it's definitely a conversation that I will be having with the city manager to budget for next fiscal year, and with the council.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions at the front end? Mr. Rudin's checking in.
Yeah, and just so the council's clear, state law allows the city to destroy any records it wants to, as long as it keeps a digital copy, assuming that's permitted under the city's policy, which in this case it would be. But there are good reasons for the city to destroy records that it no longer needs, which saves the city significant costs on legal review for Public Records Act requests and things like that. And additionally, there are actual costs associated with keeping the documents. So having an up-to-date records retention policy that allows prompt destruction of no longer needed records is usually a good city practice.
Thank you. All right, let's open this to public comment. If we have any members of the public wishing to be recognized on this matter, please raise your hand at this time. Being none, we will close this to public comment, bring it back to council for further discussion. I just wanted to echo what Mr. Rudin said. Coming from the legal profession myself, it's generally considered best practices to, first of all, have a compliant and legally correct records retention and destruction policy. And then the second part of that is to make sure that the destruction policy is followed to the letter to destroy things that are no longer needed, to clear storage, but also to get rid of records so that you have a clear policy of what you have and what you don't have. And it does make compliance much easier when you know exactly that records that should be destroyed have been destroyed, that you're no longer responsible for. So while there's a tendency to be a pack rat sometimes, it's not a good policy for the city. And I think we've got a city clerk who's very familiar with this. And my expectation would be we're going to be seeing some budget items for best practices going forward. But certainly this policy is the start of doing it right by knowing what dates, what records, having this to go to. And so I'm comfortable with certainly moving ahead and following the advice of our city clerk and our city attorney on this. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Makachuk?
Organizations have been struggling with this, but it's becoming clear now that, as you say, having a clear policy to follow and destroy documents that should be destroyed and also retain those digitally that should be retained is definitely proven. And I know that our city manager, Leonardis, has been working on this, and it was been a project that's been going for a while. It's important to cleaning the garage behind City Hall, and I have been supporting this.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Yeah, like you said, I guess as lawyers know about it because it's a real hassle to go through it. And every time there's a discovery request, that's a lot of legal fees. So we definitely need a policy. My question was, do we have I assume we have a policy in place. This one is on spreadsheets and everything else heavy. Are these existing spreadsheets with different policy, restriction policies than what we are proposing now, or we've never had such a detailed policy?
We do. Oh, go ahead, Sergio.
I'll let you take the first crack at this.
Okay, I was just gonna say, our current policy, we do have a current policy. It just wasn't as robust as I'd like it to be. So it was working with Mr. Rudin. He provided some guidance on the current policy that we have, or that we're bringing forward to the council.
So the current policy is not as detailed as this one? Is that what you're saying?
No, it is not as detailed, and additionally, it doesn't address certain categories of records that a typical city retention policy would address, including email.
Okay, great. So you've looked at it, and you're comfortable with these kind of timeframes. But there is a bunch of different timeframes, and I guess our city clerk would have to be on top of it. And I guess if you can digitize it, everything, maybe a digital time bomb could be put on each one of the items so that they automatically disappear when the clock ticks down to zero, I guess. So maybe
well,
that will.
They can't do that because state law requires the city attorney's physical sign off on any destruction request. So
how's that going to happen? You're going to be reviewing all those documents 4 years later? How are you? And are you going to be spending 4 years worth of time reviewing them before you say go ahead and destroy them?
No. There's a typical destruction request that's put together by city staff outlining the categories of documents to be destroyed, and an attestation that they fit that those. Basically, if there are documents that are anything less than routine, and if there's any potential for them to actually have legitimate governmental use, typically the city attorney won't sign off on that sort of request. So it's intended to be a check on staff's destruction of records.
Okay. But I guess the same thing could be presented to you automatically, right? I mean, if the time bomb clicks on certain selection of documents, but it'll also depend on how you store it in the computer. So probably a lot of attention is going to have to be paid in how you store different things on the computer so that they could be brought up at the right time period, or you'd have to manually go through and figure out which ones the time is passed on.
These are all issues why we are all very glad we have Michelle now.
So, all right, Michelle, good luck.
Thank you.
Make sure you read every one of them. All right, thank you.
Ms. Turner.
Oh, no, none.
Okay. All right. Mr. Makachuk.
Just one final comment, just to put this into perspective. Under our records, under the proposed policy, the recording of the meeting tonight would be held, the audio and video recording would be held for 5 years, after which this would then be deleted. And that seems like an adequate period of time, and that's just one very tangible example. again, I think this has been gone through and I support it.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll
All
make
right, we've got a motion from Councilmember Makachek.
I'll second.
Ms. Lawler got her hand up for the second.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Waller,
Yes.
Councilmember Makachek,
Aye.
Mayor Petapalahi,
Aye.
and Mayor Newfeld.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
All right, moving now to committee and commission reports, and I'm happy to combine that with council member comments as appropriate. Anyone have committee commission reports? All right, I have just very briefly, I attended the VTA PAC committee on behalf of Mr. Makachek as the alternate last session, and looks like VTA is perhaps a little more functional than it's been historically. The meetings are being held and it looked like the PAC input was being solicited. And so it was nice to see. It was an improvement from when I had been on in previous years. So nothing of real specifics that need to be reported on with the VTA coming out of that, but the meeting itself was productive, and it's nice to be part of someone that was being listened to by a little bit more by VTA than they have historically. So good news to report there. That's it for me. Ms. Lawler?
This would go under council member comments.
Sure.
That's all right. I just want to reference Phil Levine's mention earlier about noise. And I was wondering if perhaps we could somehow notify the public or remind the public about our noise ordinance and when those hours of construction or landscapers, et cetera, are appropriate. I thought I'd address an issue because while most people are good, there are definitely folks that don't know that. There's a house behind me, they were jackhammering their pool on a Sunday. So, and I think they're not supposed to be, so, but I didn't say anything, but I think maybe it might be helpful.
Yeah, and reminders, getting it out on Nextdoor, getting it out on the email, and potentially letting people know what they can do for code enforcement if there are code enforcement issues, or if there's things like weekend work going on, that might actually be a helpful FAQ to add as well. I've wondered myself, both when making noise, whether I should be, and when hearing noises, whether how I would go about doing something about it on a Sunday. So I think those would be important things that staff can help us out. Mr. Elahi.
Yeah, thank you. There was one comment, public comment that was made that I was curious as to what the source was. The comment was that we are apparently going to be selling bonds so we can buy the church property. And does anybody know where that came from? Is that happening? I mean, are the rest of the city council people getting ready to sell bonds and buy the church property without letting some of us know?
I don't know, Mr. Elahi. You're the proponent of bonds, so I thought when I heard it, I thought you were behind that.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I guess I'm behind a lot of things that I don't know about. So I appreciate somebody sharing that, but I don't know how it got out. Okay. Thank you.
Interesting. Yep. But it is an interesting idea. Hadn't heard it floated before, but
not to buy church property, obviously. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Other council member comments?
And just to be clear, that was floated more to raise money to for the annexing building that we were putting together, whether that would save us some money in construction costs by getting cheap interest bonds.
Yeah, and I think you brought it up related to potential street construction as a possibility before as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Makachek.
Thank you. Everyone's seen now the construction that's going on Winchester, and how that street's going to change. And Mayor Luthold, thank you for attending the VTA meeting on my behalf, because I was in the air on my way to New York City. And I just thought I'd show you some pictures that I took of New York City and their bike lanes. Next slide. So here you can see the parking on the right, the buffer strip, and this doesn't have any bollards in it, the plastic ones, and then you see the bike lane. Next slide. So these are not uncommon in New York City. So it's interesting that some people think that this is bizarre to have in California, but New York City is further ahead on than we are on this. Next one. There you can see the bike lanes and the giant Apple ad there on the side of the building in the final slide. There you go. I just thought people may want to see something, what's going to happen on Winchester Boulevard. Yeah, that it's a good process to go through. That's what I wanted to share with you. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, and let's go ahead. If we don't have other comments, let's move to City Manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to bring to the council's attention, we opened yesterday again, 9 to 5, normal hours, which we call counter hours, open to the public. So City Hall is officially open, although in theory we were open the whole time during the pandemic, much more than our neighboring jurisdictions were in some cases, to serve the public, including our counter hours for planning and building, which are still 10 to 12 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But all of City Hall is open 9 to 5 to the public for other requests or other needs, as we were virtually, but now physically. So I wanted to bring that to council's attention. And to address the item Ms. Lawler brought up, we could send out an e-blast or a news feed about the noise ordinance rules to the public.
Great, and the other one that was mentioned was making sure that the waste collection information gets out as it becomes available and gets linked. I know they've prepared a lot of materials and they've been doing a lot of outreach already, but that'll be something to include on our website and maybe to make sure that those materials get out to our residents every way we can. There's going to be a lot of confusion, of course.
Thank you. Yes, we will add that link to our website, and we'll do an announcement on that as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, coming now to future agenda items. I just wanted to mention, I think it's being tracked by Mr. Rudin and City Clerk and Mr. Leonardis, but we should continue to bring back the remote meetings question on the timely schedule as to whether we're going to continue remote meetings or resume in person, and continue to plan for our future hybrid world as well when that becomes appropriate.
And that was on today's consent calendar.
Ah, very good. Okay. So that gets us through another month, and I guess we'll see it again in 2 meetings down the road. Ms. Lawler, do you have your hand up? You've got your hand halfway up. Okay.
I do. Sorry. I think this has been asked, I think, already, but I thought it would be, Saratoga had agendized at their last meeting a discussion on the local land use initiative that was authored by Bill Brand from Redondo Beach. And I would suggest that we do the same so we can have a discussion and educate the public on what's happening.
Yes, we, Councilmember Lawler, we plan on bringing back the correspondence that you emailed us late last week as an agenda item coming up. It's either going to be November 2nd for November 16th.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Ms. Turner?
Yes, I would like our city clerk, Cheryl Radcliffe, to come up again in probably a week or so, or a meeting or so, to report on her progress on C-Click Fix.
All right, sounds good. We can look at bringing that back as either a regular item that we bring on regularly, or just kind of on a time by time basis when there's information. But I hear you that we certainly want to see what's going on, regular progress reports on that from the city manager and the city clerk. So, okay, anyone else? I think that's it. We've come to the end of the calendar. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and everyone's input. And I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.